All right, it looks like we are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending the Your Story Matters RP and mental health conversation during this very important week, Mental Health Action Week here at Purdue University, a great collaboration between Purdue student government and several student organizations. Today with us, we have 5 incredible rising professionals through the Purdue Rising Professionals organization or student organization that is kicking off their program early next week. And again, we have 5 esteemed Boilermaker alumni with us, or 4 esteemed Boilermaker alumni. I can obviously count today. So let's go through meeting them. First, we have Dr. Evoy. Dr. Evoy graduated with a degree in PharmD in 2013, and he is currently a clinical assistant professor at UT Austin in the College of Pharmacy, as well as an ambulatory care pharmacist at University of Health in San Antonio. Then we have Tiffany Legge. She is a principal at Boston Consulting Group today, but she graduated in 2011 with a BS in mechanical engineering. Next, meet Jackson Troxel. Jackson Troxel graduated with a BS in agricultural economics in 2013, and today he is the vice president of sales and marketing at Multiply Technology. Next, let's meet Lexi Highland. Lexi graduated with a BA in 2013 in film and video studies from Purdue. She today is an award-winning film editor, and she's worked with incredible companies and well-known companies like Spotify, Cadillac, Amazon, Disney, and ABC. Next, let's meet Victoria Loong. Victoria graduated with a BS in psychology and a BA in sociology in 2014. And she also has a master's degree in higher education administration and public policy. And today she is the coordinator at We the People in Detroit. Welcome, Victoria, as well as Lexi, Jackson, Tiffany, and Dr. Evoy. We're so happy to have all of you today for this very important conversation about mental health. As I was talking with Jackson earlier and the rest of everyone earlier, Jackson and I were specifically just speaking about how Mental Health Action Week began on Purdue's campus last year for the first time and has been led by our Purdue student government. And specifically, our current president, Asada Gilmore, was a huge person who was involved in creating this event. So we're extremely grateful for her leadership. But again, this is just a very important topic. And so again, we're glad to have all of you. Thank you for being with us today. To kick off this important conversation, Andrew and I, my co-chair and I, Andrew Beering and Claire Bainey, that's who we are today, have been talking about how this conversation about mental health has changed over time. And again, we're able to have this conversation because it's been kind of normalized in some ways, or we hope at least. So we just want to know, what has this conversation looked like in your lives, and how has it evolved when you've talked about mental health with close friends or significant others?
I can start, take a stab at it. I love being the first person to answer panel questions. Well, I mean, honestly, it's exactly what you said, Claire. It didn't happen for me, at least. You know, when I was in Purdue, I don't think I thought about it once, to be completely honest. And now many of my close friends, we talk weekly about very deeply, in depth about how we're doing. They are very open about their, what they talk about in their therapy sessions, and offering advice to each other about, how do you choose a good therapist? How do you know that person's right for you? Because just doesn't mean that it's going to be the right person. So really just even how much we talk about it now, it has been the biggest change, and I'm so glad for it.
I'm happy to jump in next. For me, I actually started to deal with some mental health challenges first when I was at Purdue. So my freshman year, I started fainting essentially when I would get highly anxious or nervous about something. And I remember leaning on my roommates, some sorority sisters, et cetera, to help me through that process. But around that time, it wasn't talked about as much. And so it was a bit stigmatized. I kind of kept it under wraps. I didn't tell people openly. And that's a stark contrast to now. The type of career that I have is very project oriented. It's client services. And so I essentially am starting a new project with a new team once every 2 to 3 months on average. And I now, in my very first conversations and introductions, talk about how important mental and physical health is to me, and how I'll be incorporating those elements into my calendar. And so I have certain blocks so I can go to the gym. I meet with my therapist every Friday at 5 p.m. And I have other consistent things and behaviors. And I typically even ask and encourage my team to talk about whatever blocks or things that they want to do to ensure that they are prioritizing their health in whatever way makes sense for them.
I can add one more answer if you want another panel person to go. So
Absolutely.
I would say, as a man growing up in the Midwest, you're kind of taught to bottle up your feelings and not talk about your shortcomings. And really that's how I grew up, kind of the men don't cry and all that kind of stuff. And so that's really kind of what's been taught to me over the years. But I would say in the last few years, I've become a lot more comfortable talking about, my struggles. And then also realize that, when I open up to other people and, confide in other people, then in turn that helps other people kind of feel more comfortable doing the same. And so I think, with groups of men, especially, if no one is willing to step up and, talk about struggles, then all the other men are not going to do it either. And so it seems like in this day and age, we really need to have, more than surface level conversations, but it's tough too, because at least in this stage of my life, you have a lot of kind of peripheral connections, but maybe not as many deep connections as you had when you were younger. And so if you don't make it a point to, have deeper conversations, then stuff like that just never comes up in conversation. You just kind of talk about sports or, whatever's going on at work and kind of move on. And you could easily spend a whole evening with your guys and never talk about that. So I think that's one of the things, is just learning that if somebody doesn't initiate that conversation, then it just won't happen. And so being comfortable sharing your struggles. And then for me, my faith is really important too. So for the last several years, I've led a weekly Bible study with my church, and those guys, we have gotten to the point where we can kind of share things a little bit deeper. And that really helps me to have, a group of like-minded guys. And then also, hearing about their struggles helps me realize that, even as a Christian man, you don't have to be perfect all the time. You're going to make mistakes too, and being willing to admit that even to, other people of my faith was important for me too.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So Kirk and Victoria both talked about how, you guys both didn't really experience or think about mental health in college. And I know, Kirk, you just talked about making connections later on. And I think one way a lot of college students deal with mental health, but they don't really realize it, or it's not labeled mental health, is through mentors and advisors and close colleagues. And how did you, did you have a mentor or an advisor in college? And how did you find this person and connect with them and leverage them?
I can start on this. I think when you look at the element of mentorship, that can take a number of different facets. Sometimes it might be like a village helping support you on your development track, and there may not be that dedicated individual that you're going to. I would say in topics like this, sometimes it's nice to have some of that confidentiality or that trust. But I also really agree and want to echo the fact that it's so great that we can be more vulnerable and we don't have to show up and act like we're perfect, because that is truly a facade anyway. But for me, I felt really blessed to have an opportunity at Purdue as a junior to get plugged into this organization that was just kind of getting going, called Edge Mentoring. And it was a peer network in that there were 5 other folks that were within maybe 5 to 7 years. And then we had a mentor that was 30 years into his business career. And that was just really a game-changing element, because as I was going through a lot of different life changes, from being an upperclassman to evaluating a job to navigating life in a new city to being engaged, getting married, settling in, kind of struggling to hit my stride early in my professional career, that mentorship piece was pretty crucial. And I think that there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it, but Kirk brought up something about kind of those common values. I think ultimately when you're looking for a mentor or someone that you can trust, I think it's important to kind of see something that is really attractive in how they're living their life, those character pieces that really stand out, and ultimately someone that maybe is a few steps ahead that can help you get to where you would like to be, but in a way that they're genuine, and that's kind of a two-way relationship. So that's where I'll leave that, and maybe Lexi would have a few things, because I know she was actually a part of Edge mentoring as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I can speak about Edge too, and this is something I joined after school, but it's the same kind of like faith-based and business and mentorship, and I found out about it through some Purdue connections as well. I was lucky enough to have an old master kind of be a mentor for a little bit while I was in school, and kind of got me a job opportunity when I got an internship to go to the Olympics. He helped me kind of think through all the possible things that I would experience while I was there. And then also an advisor on the program of Old Masters, became a good friend, and also just someone that I really looked up to. And she spent time, like, we would talk on campus and go get coffee, and we had a good relationship over the years, so much so that, like, when her siblings got married, I actually ended up filming a couple of their weddings, and that was just someone I met through a program at Purdue. And then I had a third mentor kind of in my senior year when I was deciding to whether to move to New York or to stay in Indiana after I graduated. A CCO advisor over and helped me kind of like understand, like, what do I want to do with my life? Is this going to be a good decision to take this job or take this job? So we spent a lot of senior year kind of having one-on-ones, and she would just talk me through like possible outcomes and things like that. And there were decisions that I didn't want to make without consulting, people I'd met in certain programs, student government and Old Masters and things like that, all over Purdue's campus. And then also just consulting people in my field, and to have kind of like all these areas that were able to be kind of like spoken into me about, okay, you know who you are, you know what you want to do, like what is going to be the best decision for you going forward in your life. And so, I'm a huge proponent for mentorship, and now I try and like do similar things with, younger filmmakers, younger women in film. I'm a big advocate for that. So I just think, especially once you've had one, you want to kind of pass it along.
Absolutely. It was really cool to hear about both of your Edge mentoring experiences and how there's a connection there with Jackson and Lexi. And Lexi, I know that Andrew and I, being a part of Old Masters, we got to talk with you earlier in the week. And I just remember in that conversation, I was like, I can tell that Lexi really cares about mentorship, just in the things that you had shared with us. So I think that's really helpful to hear that from you. So thank you. Going off of this, I think, as we're talking about mentorship in this question, it's really clear that having a support system is important, especially when we're talking about a topic like mental health, just because that support system, I think, sometimes can be more important than we realize. And if without having a good support system, I think it can be really easy for us to tell ourselves that we can't do something. So my question is, while you were at Purdue or earlier in your careers, did you ever have a time where it just felt like you were in an I can't do this moment? And if so, can you tell us what that was like, if you feel comfortable, and how did you move through that, most importantly?
I'm happy to go first on this one. So I should mention my first career was in engineering and my second career is in management consulting. And a bit of that model is you're constantly doing new projects, and it's very much up or out, meaning you get promoted or you get fired, essentially is the concept of management consulting, or people leave on their own. And so a lot of times the type of environment, you have very high performers, a lot of overachievers, and it's a culture of constant feedback. Which can create some insecurities in others. And so for me, I have experienced different types of adversity in life, and I always consider myself a relatively level-headed person. And so I actually prided myself a few years back on not getting drawn into, sort of equating my self-worth into my performance at my job. And back in 2018, I got a promotion, and this promotion would shift me from being an individual contributor to managing teams. And it was my first time doing that. And I realized what type of manager I was, which was one that's highly empathetic. And I got to know my team, and I started to carry their stress and their struggles on my shoulders. And then we ended up getting into a point where we made a mistake on a project, on a analysis. We socialized that to the CEO of this organization, and this was a large corporation. And we learned later that we had made a mistake, so we had to go back, redo the work, and then re-socialize. But at the end of that, of course, because we had hit so many rocky points, from a performance perspective, my review ended up being, a bit mediocre, a bit subpar. And I kind of fell into that same trap that I had always prided myself on not falling into. And that actually spun me into this deep state of negativity and depression, because I was typically a very lively person. And I found myself struggling with my motivation and struggling with my confidence. And that continued to impact not only my performance at my job, but also, my friendships and family interactions outside of work. And I ended up leaning on, it was actually interesting, a very close friend of mine from Purdue who was in my sorority, who had gone through something very similar. I was with a partner at a time, and he was very supportive of that as well. And I had, prior to that, because I was so busy, started to deprioritize some of the things that I would normally do to maintain my mental health, like seeing my therapist, meditating, journaling, and things like that. And it actually took the support of my, that peer group around me, and then me prioritizing, ensuring that I'm taking the time to step back to gain my confidence, and then sort of shift my trajectory there. So that was my personal experience.
I can jump in and kind of connect to the last question and this question, actually, because in my when I got into college, I wanted to go into clinical psychology. My plan from the get-go was to apply to PhD programs in clinical psychology. And around my, I think the second semester, my junior year, or first semester of my senior year, it was late in my college career that I changed my mind. And I didn't know how to handle it, because I didn't know, I've spent all this time trying to get to the place where I thought I wanted to be. I don't have a clear idea of where I want to be next. I have somewhat of an idea, but I didn't really know. And what was most actually worrisome for me was the person who I considered to be one of my strongest mentors in psychology, one of my professors, Dr. David Rowlick. I mentioned it to him. I said it to him. I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if this is where I want to be necessarily. And I was worried that he was going to say, that he was going to respond negatively and try to get me to continue going down this path that I had been going down for the past couple of years now. And what happened was he actually was very supportive. He said, I'm disappointed because I think you would be a wonderful, addition to the field, for example, but he was very supportive in my idea, because he wanted, and I could tell, he wanted what was best for me, not what he thought was best for me. And I think that's one of the most important things that I learned that I wanted and needed in a mentor moving forward as well, when I started to look at other people and other mentors in my life. And I think that's really what got me through. So these mentorship relationships are very important, and particularly when I was in college around that time, was very, very important for me.
I can go ahead. Yeah, when I was in school, I kind of learned I talked about this in one of the classrooms, but kind of how to ask for what you need and to not be shy about it, and kind of know for yourself eventually. And you get more comfortable, and you start to know who you are even more and more. I think, like, once you're going through your college career and then afterwards. So I just really learned how to kind of delegate tasks when I was in student government, and when my co-running mate, Joe Rust, and I were running for student body president and vice president. We had so much going on, but there were times that I had to be like, hey, Joe, like, I really need you to help me out with this. Like, I can't take on all this stuff, because I had hit a point of like burnout when it was like, I was laying on my sorority floor because I was just so exhausted, and I didn't know how to take some things away or say no to some things and say yes to some things. But I think it comes down to really being honest with yourself and knowing, like, why am I doing this thing? Or like, what do I want out of this program, this experience, this relationship, this friend group, whatever it is, to really just kind of learn how to be vulnerable with yourself. And I think, if you have people in a support system that are able to show you, like, this is who you are, or like, this is what you're good at, or this is what you want to do. And I know that because I know you and I love you and I care about you. Like, that's life changing. It literally can help you go down a path where, you trust, what you're doing. You trust that you enjoy it. You trust the people around you. And that's something I learned while I was at school. And so now that we've gone into like 2020 COVID era, and now that we're kind of living through this interesting time, like, something I kept saying last year was like, find your allies. That's like something that I like am constantly thinking in my head, like, find your allies, find the people that, you have their back and they have yours. And it takes time to build those types of relationships. But anywhere I go, I know that I have a support system and a group of people that, really can speak to, like, okay, this is who Lexi is. And like, this is the person that she's going to continue to be, even when there are setbacks or challenges of any kind.
If I can hop into, not to belabor this question, but I just really loved what Lexi said there, because just some of those key themes that she pulled out very succinctly: knowing yourself, being humble enough to ask for help, being able to delegate. I'll be honest, I was horrible at a lot of those things in college. And my mindset in college was just barrel through, pull an all-nighter. It was very unsustainable. I would say that I was overcommitted from taking too many credit hours, involved in too many student orgs. And I know maybe a lot of the students listening to this feel similarly, that they're in so much and they're trying to maximize that Purdue experience, which I was too. And I think that's a great thing. But I would just say that the idea of knowing yourself, having the humility of how to ask for help, is such a big thing. And delegating is something I still struggle with. And so, like, that idea of community, finally, when you have people that know you well, which was one of Lexi's final points, when you have that tribe, when you have those people that are looking out for you, that does make it so much easier to be honest with yourself, who can check out those blind spots in your life. And I don't know if anyone has studied the Enneagram, but for me, I'm a helper. And that's the number 2. And I guess the bad part of helpers is we kind of have this hidden pride. And that means I'm really, really bad at asking for help. And also, I bite off more than I can chew. So the ironic thing is, I can see other people's needs, but I really have a hard time, like, seeing my own and admitting them, because I have this inner hidden pride. And just being able to acknowledge that, deal with that, have people help me, be like, hey, you need to check yourself. Those are all really important things. So thanks for letting me hop in for a few on that.
No, that was awesome. Thanks to everyone. Delegation, community, that, dealing with those I can't do this moments, being honest with yourself, the Enneagram plug. It's a great way to be honest with yourself if someone is watching and hasn't done it. But, segueing right off of that, Jackson, you talked about being too involved, or Lexi, you talked about kind of, feeling like you were burning out or being drug under by how much stuff you have going on. Quitting has kind of a negative connotation in society. However, it isn't necessarily a bad thing. Narrowing your priorities, making sure you're not overcommitted. Is there something that you have quit that aided in allowing you to accomplish your goals, or focus on school, or focus on work? Just kind of open-ended.
I can jump in there. I think I was the last one not to talk in the last one, so I'll take a first stab at this. I guess I would say, first, as a caveat, I don't really like the idea of quitting. So in my eyes, dependability is one of the most important character traits that I look for in people that I work with. And if I expect that of them, then I try to make sure I live up to that standard too. So if I commit myself to something, I'm probably going to see it out to the end. Having said that, though, I think there's a lot to be said for being really careful up front to not overcommit yourself and not get to that point where you feel like you have to quit. And so I think overcommitting and realizing that you're overcommitting, learning to find ways to, my mentor used to say, pick your nose. You have to learn to pick your nose. Basically, you don't have to say yes to everything. In fact, you shouldn't say yes to everything. So kind of figuring out that process of which opportunities come along, should I say yes to, and which opportunities come along, should I say no to? That's a really important skill set to learn early on, especially for people, that are really striving to achieve a lot. It's very easy to just say yes to everything that comes your way and try to look like a superhero. But then in the end, that can expedite your road to burnout. It can tie up your time so that you're so busy when some better opportunity comes along, you miss out because you don't have any more time to devote to that new thing that's probably going to get you closer to your goals than the other things you already committed yourself to. So I definitely am on board with kind of choosing things wisely and learning to say no, learning to pick your nose. And so how do I do that? I guess a few things. Whenever you're first asked to take on a new responsibility, I think one of the most important things you want to figure out first is, are you being asked to do this as like an opportunity where you can say yes or no, or are you being kind of voluntold to do this where your boss or somebody above you is really basically expecting you to do it? If it's the former, you probably need to do it. But if it's the latter, then you really want to think about, what are your big picture goals? And does this opportunity really truly help me get closer to those goals? If it doesn't truly get you closer to those goals and you truly have an option of saying no, then I think you should really think about, what good is it doing me to say yes? I'd rather wait for an opportunity that's going to be better for my career. And so I kind of use 4 big picture questions, I guess, as I'm thinking through these things, that can kind of serve as a compass. And I'll give you those to kind of chew on. And I would encourage you to think about them now, and then again, maybe, kind of early in your career and periodically. This may change a little bit, but I think these are kind of good guiding questions to think about. So 1, how do you define career success? And not like pie in the sky, like I'd love to be president of the United States, but in reality, when you're retired, what's going to look like a successful career to you in a realistic world, something that is reasonably attainable. Number 2 is, how do you define personal success? What's success in your personal life? And then number 3, kind of putting those together, is how do you achieve both of those without losing sight of one or the other? I think that's the ultimate equation is, we could work super hard forever and have tons of career success, but miss out on a lot of other important things in life. And on the flip side, you could, clock in, clock out, spend all your time on your personal life, but maybe not really have a satisfying career. So that balance of how do you achieve both without losing sight of another is really kind of the ultimate equation. And the other thing I would make sure you don't lose sight of is just, how do you use the training that you obtained here at Purdue? How do you use this degree that you worked so hard for to make a positive impact on the world? So I'd hate to say that you went through this life and did so many great things in your career, but you really didn't make a positive impact on the world. You just kind of did great things in your career to have career success. Then that's probably not fulfilling in the long run either. So those are kind of 4 questions that I use to guide myself and kind of think about whether certain opportunities are good things to take on at this point in time and will get me closer to my long-term career and personal goals.
I can pop in.
Oh, go for it.
Sorry. Sorry. I was just going to say a couple things. 1, that was an awesome framework, Kirk. That was really thoughtful. And I had to check myself. I think the 3rd time I finally got what you were saying, it was N-O''S, not N-O-S-E, and picking your nose. That's a good play on words. But I think just a few things. The idea of quitting, I think there's a way to do it well. And I think one rule as a leader, I do want to leave things better than I found it. And I also think that it's important as a leader to replace yourself. I've heard it said before that one of the top jobs of a leader is to replace yourself. So just thinking in mind that relationships are also important. So don't run from your responsibilities and leave other people hanging and then in part burn bridges. But at the same time, this idea of being able to discern what you're involved in is so important. So just 3 quick things on that, just to highlight that point. Number 1, a quote that I've heard that has been pretty impactful that I'm working on, not there, but if it's not a heck yes, then it's a no, something to think about, right? If you're kind of teetering on the edge, understanding that every yes that you say yes to, every decision you say yes to is something you're also saying no to. And then also, I think it's important just to create different times in life throughout the year that are intentional, where you can just reflect and think about your involvements and what you're carving out in your day-to-day life. And that is kind of a good point in time to really be honest with yourself.
I love what both of you said to that. And I just want to add a quick thing to what Dr. Evoy said at the beginning, was thinking upfront about how what you can commit to, because I think that's actually another important thing about leadership in a lot of ways, is being able to step back and not always take up that much space. Because I know we're talking a lot about our own mental health, but we also have to think about other people's mental health, I think. And I'm loving that how much the other RPs, I feel like we've talked about relationships a lot. Not just in this, in this forum, but others as well. And you never know what opportunity that you are presented with, that you have an option to accept or decline, that could mean the world to somebody else. If you don't need to, or if you don't want to, or if you cannot take on that responsibility, that it's going to somebody else. And it could mean a lot to that person and to their mental health as well. So I'll leave it there, but I really loved what both of you have said about that.
I don't want to belabor it either, but I'm going to go ahead and be the fourth to make one more add. I loved what both of you said, and I also I jotted down some notes when Dr. Evoy was talking through his framework as well. The one add that I would have is, I think that if you are not prioritizing your mental health, no one else is going to. And so as you think about the capacity that you have, the value that something could bring, the potential opportunities, make sure that you're always circling back to yourself and your needs, and if you actually can contribute to that. That's all. I'll just pause there.
Absolutely. That's really helpful to think about all of that. I think that, especially what you just ended with, Tiffany, that if you're not prioritizing it, other people won't. I think that's really important. Like, we have to be able to I guess maintain our own space while also being able to make space for other people when it comes to the topic of mental health. So I really appreciate, again, what you said and what everyone added as well. Switching gears a little bit, especially as we, since we're all college students, well, the people listening to this, or at least college students for the most part, and of course, since you're back at Purdue, switching gears a bit, but of course, still around this topic of, being involved in that kind of thing. I think something that's really very real for students is imposter syndrome. And I think that even contributes to, why there's students who are doing so many things and are involved in so many ways that it catches up with them. And then maybe they have to, pick and choose and pick your nose, like Dr. Evoy was saying. So if you've experienced that, well, I guess wondering if you have experienced that, and also just telling us, I'd love to hear what that was like for you, and also how you worked through that as maybe a college student, or especially as a young professional, because all of us are not going to be in college forever. We're here for a reason. That's to eventually be in the workforce, as you know. But yeah, I just want to hear more about your thoughts on that.
I can kick off if that's okay. Imposter syndrome, something I feel like I'm talking too much, so I want to be cognizant of that as well, because these RPs have so many great things to say. But I've definitely felt that. I struggle with that all the time. I'm in a leadership role where I still, am learning, and every day reminded of things that I don't know. And I think that's humbling. And I think that's also fuel for the reason to keep growing and developing. And I think one thing with imposter syndrome is to realize that all of us in our humanity feel that. And I think that's okay. And also that, just to highlight one example that was really hard, I had about 2 years at a high growth technology company. When I joined, they had just raised $20 million in venture capital funding. I was like the 65th employee. And when I left, it was about 120 employees. And in the interview process, I remember saying something to the effect of, who cares what seat you're on when you're going to the moon, right? And I just kind of ate those words because I ended up being kind of stuck in a role that didn't necessarily bring me to life. It didn't fit my strengths in a way. And in those 2 years, I saw other people loving their jobs, being all about the company, spreading the Kool-Aid, drinking the Kool-Aid. And for me, I just felt like, man, what is wrong with me? What am I not getting? And I think it was just this reality that one, there was a lot of lessons learned in that hard season. So I think it's important to be okay, like soaking those up in those difficult times. And two, when you're trying to be comparing yourself to everyone else, it was really stealing my joy. And that was a big part of it too, because I was always trying to, instead of being content and trying to understand how I could work through what I was going through, I was always comparing myself, and that didn't help. But I also think this element of self-awareness comes back because sure, you may feel like you're an imposter, but one, community helps solve for that. And two, the reality is that you're really on this journey of continually developing, and everyone feels that. So don't really let that be just stuck in your head. When you're able to verbalize that with people that you respect the most, I think you can really help overcome that.
I'm happy to chime in as well. I think transparently, I felt the imposter syndrome more so in my second career. So I, after not as much at Purdue, I was super involved and super active, and I felt like I, had it all figured out. When I was actually switching my career, I went to business school, and then I got this new job. And I remember I have the offer, and I'm now in the room with the other individuals who had gotten the offer as well. And as we're doing introductions and I'm hearing about them, the people just seemed so accomplished. There were other MBAs, but there were MDs, JDs, people who had just experienced different things and had different or brought different things to the table. And I remember sitting in the room thinking, like, why am I here? And do I belong here? And obviously I'm a Black woman as well, and I work in a very corporate position where there are a lot of women and definitely not a lot of people of color. And that was also striking to me. And I constantly questioned, like, will I fit in? How should I fit in? And so that was one instance. And then later in the same career, I'm often now in the room with CEOs or partners from my firm. And I struggled at some times to defend my point of view. So if I had a perspective and someone disagreed with it, I would often defer or back down because I felt like, okay, well, they're the expert. They're the ones that are more credentialized. So who am I to disagree or boil the ocean, I think is the right term. And for me, it actually took some coaching. I actually got an executive coach at my firm. And then I also spent some time just first, like, reaffirming that I do belong. Like I too have made it through things and bring a subset of accomplishments to the table. I too have a perspective that is actually valuable and sometimes can, create quality output in some of these settings. And so that was one piece of it, just growing my own self-confidence. I think the other piece of it that's a bit more helpful for me is to continue to humanize others. I think that we tend to get into these rooms with different people and we are putting others on pedestals. And in reality, they are humans just like the rest of us. They go through the same types of challenges that you may go through. They have fear and anxiety, and sometimes they may feel like they're the imposter. And so it's constantly reminding myself that we're all humans and that these are human behaviors and human things to go through. And that's helped me in the times where I've felt like I didn't belong in a situation or in a room.
I can go ahead and talk. Yeah, I feel like that's something that's like pretty sits at home with me. I was born in a different country in a small city, like 40,000 people in the middle of Colombia, and I'm adopted too. So it's like every single day I'm almost like sometimes I'm like, do you belong in this soil? Just because I've gone back to Columbia and I've experienced kind of where I've come from and who I am and this huge part of me. So it's like not even just in the work sense and in a personal sense. I think it's always been something that I've kind of been aware of like, you are going out into the world and you have these things already that are a part of your story. Like, how do you communicate that to people, even though you're not fluent in Spanish, or, you don't necessarily have like a home there. And it's not like I'm back in Colombia all the time. So even taking that into work, it's like showing up and having the confidence to say like, this is who I am. Sometimes it may always, it might feel like imposter syndrome in work, in personal life, and family life. But I think what's interesting is that, we'll all experience that in various ways, but everything we've talked about with like having support systems and people that know you and can say like, no, this is this person, like they can just affirm that even if you're, learning something or you're trying to grow and maybe you're, you want to say like, I know all this, but I don't quite yet. And you're still learning, no one can necessarily look at you and say like, no, you're this, like stay in this, pocket. Like I've made up in my head, like what you are and who you are. But the beautiful thing about, the fact that we're all here trying to make sense of all of our journeys is that, you can actually step out into the world and say like, I'm very proud of who I am or where I come from. And I'm very proud of the work that I do. I actually lost my job back in May of last year because of COVID. And it was like a job that I was like, all excited about, great work. It gave me a lot of good clients and things like that. And so now I'm living through this whole entire imposter syndrome of a year where I'm like disconnected from that company. Like, am I still good at my job? Am I still who I said I wanted to be in this time period of my life? And I think, just going back to, again, like the whole idea of mental health and support and community is that those people can show up and I can have those conversations and kind of sit through that grief of losing something, but also knowing like, you've done all this work, be proud of that and take that forward into the next job or the next opportunity, because that's the trick I think we get in our heads is that, you're alone, or, okay, they were right, or you did this thing and you can't ever do it again. And I don't have time to listen to that. You know what I'm saying? Because we have to help each other, get to the next point and get to the next part of our journeys. And I think, based off of what everyone's saying, like community and support are like huge ways to also combat that type of imposter syndrome or the negative things you might be telling yourself when shortcomings and things happen in life.
Awesome. So Lexi, you actually kind of did the segue for me on that one with one aspect of our next question here. So, and loss is something we all experience, whether it be loss of a job, kind of like you mentioned, loss of family members due to death or other circumstances. Loss has many different forms. Besides just imposter syndrome, how, and this is open for everyone, but how have you been able to keep showing up to your responsibilities, your daily responsibilities, your schoolwork or your professional work? There's always people who still rely on you, even if one part of your identity may be gone now. So how do you keep showing up and delivering for your responsibilities?
I'm happy to kick this one off as well. So the time that I experienced loss, or actually the first time that I experienced was my senior year at Purdue. I had to have been, I know I started off at Purdue as a 4.0 student. I was actively involved, and first semester of my senior year, my grandmother passed away. And I didn't grow up with a mother figure, so she was the closest thing to a mother figure that I had, and it happened abruptly. I remember I was in one of the student offices. My dad had texted me and said, or he called me, I missed the call, and then he texted me and said, call me back ASAP. One of the words was misspelled, and when I picked up the phone, I could hear his voice trembling, and he told me, and I broke down. And at that moment, my sister was actually a freshman at Purdue as well. And we met, I honestly have no idea where we were, but we met on campus. We were in a bathroom, just bawling, crying. And we ended up leaving Purdue and this was maybe 3 weeks before finals. We left Purdue, drove home to Indianapolis, which is, obviously an hour away. And I did not alert anyone. I didn't tell, I don't even know any administrative person. And I ended up missing multiple finals. And at the time I was at Purdue, finals make up, 30 to, 50% of your grade sometimes. And I remember failing 2 classes. And I may have gotten a D in another class. And I was supposed to have graduated in May or June. I'd had a job lined up to start working in August. And because I failed a class that was a prerequisite for a class that I needed to take to graduate, I ended up having to negotiate with Purdue to take that class that I failed plus the class that came after it in the same semester, so I could then graduate in August. And I did all that, but I graduated Purdue with a lower GPA than anticipated, and I was in this very warped mental state of mind. And and obviously, fast forward, I made it to Purdue, I made it to, business school, et cetera, et cetera. But that loss was, again, something I had never experienced and was unexpected. And what actually happened around that time is my family came together. And I remember someone telling me that, as you grow older, you go to college and then you enter into your careers, you tend to move and go to different places in the world, and you'll come home, maybe twice a year for the holidays. And when I was at Purdue, I was only an hour away, but I was so involved and so active that I didn't take a ton of time out of my schedule to go home. And someone put it into perspective and said, considering that in the travel, et cetera, that you'll do with your life, you can probably count the number of times that you'll be in large groups with your family. And I think that's even more clear now as we reflect on 2020 and what COVID-19 has introduced into many of our lives. But when I had that perspective, that has shifted now how I prioritize time with family and friends, and even again prioritize my own mental and physical health and the things that add to my life and to bring me joy. And so I obviously would not wish loss on anyone, but I do think that loss can sometimes be this pivotal moment that changes your view and your perspective on life. And if you can get over it, then things can be far more fruitful for you afterward.
I guess I can go ahead too, since this was right up my alley. But Tiffany, thank you so much for sharing. I cannot imagine having to go through something like that and to want to show up and, keep your grades high and perform on your finals. I think the one thing that, especially because of COVID-19 and my job loss and everything, that just loss in general has taught me is that you really do have to feel every emotion and to not judge your emotions. I think sometimes in kind of high achiever land, we tend to be very hard on ourselves, and you have to really sit back and think like, am I the cause of a lot of this stress, or other people, kind of think through like, what's actually going on, and to kind of like assess your feelings a little bit more. And sometimes that's really difficult. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in the last year I've just sat at my desk and cried because I'm like, I don't know who I am right now because this has meant so much to me. And it also showed me though, in some ways, this is how much this has meant to you. What are the other areas of your life that are obviously still really, really great and beautiful and wonderful, and the people that spend time with you. And so it's definitely given a lens to kind of where I've put a lot of my worth over the years. And in some sense, being quiet and sitting with a lot of that pain, and just even the loss of the thing is for me, when I lost my job, no one was at the office. So when I went and packed up my stuff, like there was no one there to even say bye to because no one was there. So essentially I might not ever see half of those people ever again. And for me, that's a pretty traumatic thing. I mean, for anyone, if you've ever spent time and you've lost friendships or you've lost family members, like that's a really big thing. So I think, in school, and the students that have lost social lives or lost routines that have kept them sane, this is that time to really ask yourself those questions, like, who am I without these things? Or how do I just recalibrate? How do I spend time with those 1 or 2 relationships that really mean a lot? And how do I dig into that and also, show up for people the way that, I had to ask for help a lot and just say like, hey, I need to come back to Indianapolis this weekend. Like, I just don't think I can stay in my house any longer. Like, is that okay? And so, it's kind of like what Jackson said earlier with like, being able to say like, these are the needs I have right now. But I think, COVID has really made everyone go back into their homes and their heads and hearts even, and just to really dig in and say like, who do I want to be when I come out of this? And what are these things doing to me right now that I can learn like who I am and how I process things and how to grieve healthily and well, and to then, emerge a stronger, more, healthy, emotional person that is willing to, be resilient in anything that comes your way.
I might add in one more thing if we got time. So I think the 2 perspectives there are both, really honest and valuable perspectives, and those are kind of different situations than how I kind of approach this. I was thinking of it more as, you apply for a position and you don't get accepted, and so I think my example is maybe a little bit lighter. So I think, the loss of a loved one is a whole different situation, and loss of a job in a tough job market, I'm sure, is a whole different situation as well. But when I was thinking about this question, when I first heard it, it was more of, I apply for leadership positions, or, maybe you apply for a new job that you think is going to be a step up in your career or something like that. And I think, you guys as students probably have lots of these experiences as well, where, you're applying to be, maybe president of some organization and don't end up getting selected. So that's kind of how I took this question and kind of framed it in my mind. And just a few tips on that, where maybe you were really had your heart set on something and it didn't end up working out for you that time around. So the way I kind of think about those things is, for me, it's really important just to not put all your eggs in one basket. And so I think when we really get our heart set on, some leadership position or some, award or whatever it may be, if we like put too much emphasis on it, or we make it kind of this life or death thing, or we think this is the one job that's perfect for me and I really got to get this job, I think it becomes a lot tougher than if we just go into it like it'd be great to get it, but if not, there's other opportunities down the road. And just think, future opportunities will inevitably come, brush it off and kind of get back to it and just wait for that next one. Maybe that timing wasn't right for you. Maybe that wasn't the best position for you and there'll be an even better position down the road. Think about some of the positives, like not, maybe you're saving yourself some time actually, so you don't have all those extra responsibilities. Maybe it would have been really cool to be, president of that organization, but on the flip side, now you got a little extra free time to hang out with your friends and classes won't be quite as busy that semester. So think about some of the positives of it. And then also just think about it as a learning opportunity. So, we're going to all have rejection at various points in our career. We can take it as something that really makes us stall and makes us kind of get in a rut and feel like we're, a failure, or we can just kind of self-reflect on it and figure out what the learning opportunity is there. Why did we not get that position this time, and what can I do to better prepare myself for the next great opportunity that comes along? So I think those are a few things, because in my position or in my career, I apply for a lot of, kind of difficult positions and get rejected quite a bit, or apply for a lot of grants, get rejected from grants a lot. And so those are kind of some of the things that I think about when I'm going through those rejections.
Absolutely. Thank you for all those perspectives, Tiffany, Lexi, and Dr. Evoy. I think one thing that I loved about this conversation is the fact that we've talked about how mental health is deeply personal and means something different for everyone. So again, thank you for being able to just speak on each of these topics. With that being said, we have one final question that we hopefully can answer in just a couple minutes here. With being home and COVID-19 making us be home more often, I think that a lot of us have had time to reflect, or hopefully so. And so we think it'd be interesting to learn from you, each of you, how you feel like you've changed over the last year, what you've learned about yourself in that time in reflecting, and how might you encourage students to learn more about themselves.
I can start us. And can you hear me? All right. But I think one thing that I think is a valuable lesson for all of us during COVID-19 and just thinking about reflecting on this experience is that a mentor of mine, it wasn't necessarily related to COVID-19, but it was related to a time in a season where I didn't feel like I was hitting my my groove, if you will. And I think COVID has kind of pushed us off in a way that maybe our goals, maybe our desires, our ability to be with friends, our ability to experience life has always been has been really affected. But what my mentor said, he said, waiting time is not wasted time. And I think that that was just really what I needed to hear. And the element of waiting is not just this sitting back and relaxing, it's this active waiting and how you're really going to leverage that time. And I think it's this idea of, although life changed a lot, it's how we can leverage those peaks and valleys in ways that help us to really understand ourselves more and find ways to sharpen and grow through that period. And if this is the last point, I just wanted to say two other quick things. That the idea of loss is really difficult. There's a spectrum there. But I think one thing to really keep in mind is having an abundant mindset. And one final thing I'll leave any students listening is just to be others focused as you're living your life and how much richer it will make your own life. And I do think that is really a key point of establishing community and feeling connected, when you can be genuine, when you can ask about others, when you can genuinely care and have a curiosity for others. So just to be others focused would be the last point. And I know I cheated the system by just putting in some other commentary in on this question. So hopefully that's okay. A little grace needed on that.
Something that something that Lexi said in her response to the question on loss is something that I learned for myself, and that was really just to allow yourself to feel all the emotions. And I didn't learn that until very recently, actually, because through all of COVID, I would talk to my friends about and be very honest about what they were going through, and they were very in depth with their answers, and they were very genuine with them. And I realized that as we were talking and as we had more of those conversations, that I wasn't really offering as much. And it wasn't that I didn't want to offer it to them. It was just that I hadn't allowed myself to feel any of the emotions that I think we're probably all feeling. And it all hit me in one day. Honestly, I think I had a similar reaction to you. I laid on the couch and I just stared at the ceiling, and I was almost unresponsive. My partner was really concerned about what was going on. And I realized it's because I just had let a whole 6, 7, 8 months worth of bottled up emotions. And it wasn't that I was trying to bury them down. It's just that I hadn't really had deep reflection as to what I was really feeling, and what aspects of my life and what events in my life had actually affected me, and in what way. And so that's what I would say to students, is that allowing yourself to grow and to feel those emotions and to understand and identify them has been one of the most important things, at least for me. And I hope that students are also able to do that. But I think one of the things, and I mentioned this in a different conversation, was that when you are asking these days how people are doing, to be ready to both give them real and truthful answers, and not just say, I'm doing fine today, it's great to see the sun's out. You can have those answers, but I think nowadays, I think we really need to be honest with each other as well, and be ready to receive a truthful answer to how are you doing today. We miss a lot of these small conversations on the side that you might have in the hallway, or just with somebody briefly, and those build up after a while. And then we kind of disconnect from each other. Being virtually, we have all the scheduled time to talk to each other, but being able to really be honest with each other about what we're going through and what we're feeling that day is, I think, is very understandable to everybody else. So that's all I would say about that.
I'm happy to share as well, and I loved what both of you just said. I think I'll just add my other little commentary, which is the concept of giving others grace. And you also, people tend to be a bit more judgmental or make assumptions about others, and you never quite know what people are going through. And so I love the directions the other two gave. In terms of my learnings or reflections in COVID-19, I think it was actually in alignment with something that Lexi had said earlier, which was around, maybe both Lexi and Victoria touched on this point, which was around setting boundaries when we were talking about saying no. And I think it was actually now in my life when I first felt overwhelmed for the first time of taking on too many things. And I think, again, the type of career that I'm in, the working styles require a lot of, touch points. And I was just giving a lot of myself to my job, to my extracurriculars, to my family, to my friends, to my other relationships. And when I realized that I was pouring out into others, I too needed some pouring into me, or some self-care. And so I actually, probably the last 6 months of 2020, went through this, growth or evolution of just realizing, like, you need to take care of yourself. And if I'm not taking care of myself, who is going to take care of me? And so I've been very adamant since that, coming to that conclusion around setting boundaries, ensuring that I'm prioritizing the things that I need, whether they're, traditional mental, physical health things, or if it's just laying back on my couch and watching some cartoons, because that brings me a little bit of joy in the moment. And so I would encourage you all to reflect on that, just really think about the things that give you energy and that continue to motivate you to press on, and try to create more opportunities to get that into your life.
I can add in a little bit too, and I'll keep mine short because a lot of mine was about empathy and things like that as well. One thing I would say about that is just making sure that once COVID's done, once we get back to normal, that we don't lose sight of those things: the empathy, the compassion, the realizing that other people have, stuff going on in their life that we don't realize and can't know what else happened in their day or their week. But without belaboring that point too much, I think the other thing that I would just say is that, I've always considered myself an extrovert and someone who really values making friends, spending time with family. But this year really just kind of hammered that point home, just how important social interaction is to my mental health, my quality of life. Miss getting together with my friends, miss traveling to see friends that are across the country, miss randomly meeting new people out in public, miss things with large crowds. I love going to concerts and sporting events and things like that. So, I think once we get back to being able to do those things again, hopefully in the near future, I'll just appreciate them more. And I think also just kind of stressing that, as the world becomes more and more digital, it's more and more easy to kind of go back into our little shells at home and miss out on some of that true social connection. And so, even if you're not an extrovert and sometimes it is nice to be home on your own, I think just making sure that as we move farther and farther into the digital age, that we don't lose sight of, true social connection with other people, because Instagram is not true social connection with other people. And so I'll put in my healthcare plug before I jump off here, so that we can return to that normalcy as soon as possible. Please get your vaccines when you're eligible, wear your masks, trust science, and then I'll jump off and let Victoria take over.
Yeah, I guess I'll close out. I think, gosh, when you try and think about life before COVID, life after COVID, we could all probably sit on here for hours and talk about the things that, have changed in our personal lives and in our professional lives. But, it does come down to, I think, just time. Like time has really been, messed with and warped, and time we spend with our families and at work and with loved ones. And it's just so interesting. I love what like Jackson said, waiting time is not wasted time. And I've had that experience a lot in the last year of just, okay, now you have this whole new path that you have to take. And, what are you going to do with this time where the world has felt, way more separated and we're not as connected as we used to be in the same sense. Like, what are you going to do with that time? And what are you going to think about? And what, I think we tend to be so serious about life all the time. And that's great because, we have important things. We're put on this planet for a reason, but to have fun and really understand, like, man, I love doing this thing where I just go play soccer one day with my dog, like that's so joyous to me. Like, spend the time that you can doing the things that you love to do. And I think that's just been a really valuable lesson, kind of echoing on everyone, is that, when we have those opportunities to really be innovative and ask for help and reach out to people when, you need something or you want to experience something, and, or you just want to have a conversation. And yeah, like Victoria said, like, we don't have to talk about the weather. We can talk about real things today. And I think that's actually like one of the biggest blessings that we have, is that we can go into communities and spaces now in a very intentional way. So I would just say, like, time has changed in so many ways, but who we are and who we connect with and the types of people that all you students are becoming, that's so important. This is it's a molding time, right? Like, this is where the iron becomes pure gold. And I think it's something that is refined over and over when you do have that time. So yeah, thank you so much for letting us all speak today about all these different topics. It's been pretty awesome.
Well, thank you all for being here and sharing with us an enriching, honest, and open conversation about mental health. It's so important, especially now, but it always. If you are watching and Purdue affiliated, there is a link in the YouTube Live. If you could click it and get your attendance, that would be awesome. As well, all the RPs will be speaking this next Monday, March 8th, from 6 to 7 p.m. Pack the panel, Google it, and you'll find the link. It's pretty easy to find. And again, thank you, Jackson, Victoria, Lexi, Tiffany, and Kirk. It's been a pleasure being on here this Friday evening with you guys, and we appreciate it.
Thank you all so much for doing this.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.